important part when you're playing catch up. I don't know. But we'll see what we can do. Page 47. Our school psychologist said she thinks our son is suffering from childhood depression. My goodness, the kid's only 9 years old. Is it reasonable that this could be a problem? Can a 9-year-old suffer from childhood depression? I mean, it's not like adult depression, but can they suffer from childhood depression? And Dobson says, we used to believe that depression was exclusively an adult problem, but that understanding is changing. Now we're seeing signs of serious despondency in children as young as 5 years old. If depression is a problem for your child, it's only symptomatic of something else that's bothering him. Help him or her verbalize their feelings, and probably, if you're having trouble figuring out what's going on, I mean, don't we consult experts all the time in our society to help us sort things out? So go to the Calvary University Counseling Center or find a counselor somewhere and see if they can help your child sort through that thing. Page 48. Do childhood traumas inevitably twist and warp a person in their adult years? Now, let's talk about some of our childhood traumas. Remember I told you about what my mom did when I stole a little piece of bubble gum at the grocery store? That was traumatic. Did that warp me as an adult? Well, apparently it did. Because remember I told you when I worked with junior high kids and I talked to them about if I see somebody stealing something at the store, I turn them in and they all go, narc. And I said, what do you mean? What's that mean? They go, you ratted the guy out. I'm going, hey, I don't know who the guy is. All I know, if he steals stuff, he makes the prices go up for me. So I guess in that sense, it warped me in that I'm more concerned about the storekeeper and about what I have to pay for stuff than I am about the delinquent who's stealing stuff. Now, can you tell by my choice of words who I favor least and who I favor most in this scenario? Oh, but the poor kid stealing doesn't have any money and his father doesn't work and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe in that sense I'm warped because I don't have that sympathy for the person. But you know what? It could be that somebody would say, my father teaching me to work hard when I was younger traumatized me and gave me this war perspective that I think if you don't work, you don't eat. I mean, I just tend to think that if you want some money, go get a job and go to work and earn it. And if you don't want to earn the money, then don't steal to get what you want. So I guess some people would say the things that traumatized me in my childhood. Oh, I can think of another one. When I drive on ice, I am very, very careful. Because when I was a teenager and I was driving on some ice, I hit my brakes and my truck spun around 3 times and went sliding down the road backwards. And fortunately, I was able to drive out of the ditch and get back on the road and go to where I was going. But that traumatized me to where I'm much more cautious. The movies that they showed me in driver's training about cars trying to beat a train across the track and getting hit and killing people was a bit of a trauma. Do you understand? And I'm thinking, okay, that's made me, I mean, if I'm sitting at a railroad crossing where the arm has come down and I see some guy behind me just get tired of waiting, have you ever seen that, and just shoot out and drive through there, I go, oh no, He's going to get hit by a train. There's no train coming. The lights malfunctioned. Why don't you drive around those markers? I just can't do it. So you understand when it talks about childhood traumas affecting us in our adult lives? But see, the question on page 48 was, does it twist and warp us? And I suppose, is this okay to say all of us are a little warped and twisted to some degree?
Some more than others.
Yeah, and some more than others.
Yeah.
And we would look at each other and tend to think that I'm more normal and other people are warped and twisted, when it's like, no, maybe I'm a little warped and twisted in this stuff too. And so I'm thinking, okay, all of us have had experiences that can mess with us as adults. In fact, maybe you could just look at traumatic things that happened in your childhood and think about, what are the adult consequences of that? When I was in woodworking shop as a teenager, one of my friends was chasing me. I don't even know why he was chasing me, but I was trying to get away from him, and I was running for the door to run out of the classroom. And there was sawdust on the floor, and it was a concrete floor. Do you see the collision that's coming? I'm trying to stop, and I slide on the sawdust, and it's one of those big glass doors, and I put my hand up, and it went right through the glass door, and then I go, and I pulled it back real fast, which was a bad idea, because the glass cut me twice. And I have here and here scars. They're almost gone now, but I've had scars that show where that, and they wrapped my hand up and took me to the doctor to see if they need to put stitches in it. So, will I put my hand on a glass window to push a door open? Not going to happen. So think about some of your childhood traumas. And if I have a glass storm door in my house, the first thing I ask is that shatterproof glass? You know, is it the kind of glass that could cut somebody if they ran into it? And if it is, let's replace it with something else. So traumatic things that happen in our childhood do affect us later in life. And I'm thinking that some of it's for the better. It isn't always damaging. Some of those things that happen to us can improve the quality of our lives. And sometimes it can affect us adversely. Just like the way my dad talked about people who raised pigs and sheep. Why would they do that? Pigs stink and sheep are so dumb, is what he would say. And we raise cattle. Do cattle stink? Have you ever been around cattle? Have you ever gone to, go visit a stockyard. Sometime when you're driving through the country and you see a stockyard, just stop and smell it and see what you think. It's like, yeah. It's like, but it didn't stink to us. Why? Because we adjusted to the smell, because we raised them. And I'm thinking that's the same way the pig farmer thinks. And the guy who raises sheep. Because you take sheep, when they get rained on, their wool smells awful. Maybe that was another traumatizing experience. My grandfather, when he used to have his sheep sheared, he would ask my dad if we boys could come over and help, and the wool was stored in these big long bags, and he would have us stand in the bag and stomp the wool down so they could get more wool in a bag, and they would throw the wool in on top of us, and we would slide it by and stomp it down, and we had to smell that awful wool smell. I mean, sheep just don't use deodorant, and the smell just builds up. And I'm thinking, okay. But one thing that did for me, having a job where I had to work with smelly stuff, I know one thing it did for me. When we got married and had a baby, and the little baby got sick and started vomiting, my wife started getting sick holding the baby, and I said, "Here, give her to me." And I held her and put a little pan in front of her and just said, "It's okay. Whatever's in there, your body doesn't like it. It'll have to come out." And I was just talking her through it, and that was helping her. But it didn't smell good. But it's like, hey, I've worked around stuff that didn't smell good before. So maybe some trauma ends up with some benefit. Can you think of some early trauma in your life that's benefited you, that's been a benefit to your existence as a young adult? I'm the only one that was ever traumatized. You haven't had any trauma? Who got hit by the swings trying to run through them?
I did.
So, how do you feel about when you're out on a playground with little kids swinging high like that and little kids running around? Do you have this, watch out for those little kids, don't let them get hit by that swing?
Yeah.
That would be a good benefit, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I know how it feels to get knocked down by someone flying through the air. I watch out for little kids at the playground. Anybody else think of some trauma? Did you ever fall out of a car when the door came open? Oh no, you lived in the seatbelt era, didn't you? My brother did one time. That was only happened once. What do you think he does for the rest of his life when he gets in a car? Lock the doors, lock the doors. Anybody else think of something? Did you ever touch something that was hot? You saw a candle, it looked pretty, you reached out to it. So now that that's happened to you, if somebody says, "Oh, you want to put the candle out?" Have you ever seen anybody put a candle out just by licking their fingers and then squeezing it? Are you willing to do that? Logan says no. The rest of you? No.
I do it.
What?
I do it.
Now, you know why they lick their fingers before they touch that wick?
Helps with the heat.
The moisture keeps the fire from burning you. You go, what? If you don't believe it, if you have a hot pan on the stove, if you don't want to lick your finger, put some water on it, touch the pan, and it'll go zzz, and when it sizzles, that means it just evaporated the water off your finger, but you pulled your hand back and it didn't burn your finger. The sound told you how hot it was. Okay, let's move on from page 48, because we got some ground to cover, to page 57. You've given a pretty bleak picture of the ADHD kids, of raising ADHD kids. What kind of treatment is available? And Dr. Dobson says on page 57, treatment involves a range of factors, beginning with education. The adult with ADD is often greatly relieved to learn that he has an identifiable, treatable condition. The first step is gain an understanding of the forces that operate within. My advice to that individual and to his or her family is read, read, read. Do all the research you can to learn about what's going on with an ADD or an ADHD child. The second step is teach the ADD person to minimize distractions and impulsive actions. Just figure out ways to keep from being distracted. If you're ADD or ADHD, people say play music while you're studying. That doesn't help them, that just gets in the way. So teach them some concentration skills and teach them how to put a check on their impulses. If a wise instructor can teach a novice to play tennis, a caring coach can help a person with ADD learn to behave in more successful ways. Page 58, do you worry about Ritalin and other drugs being overprescribed? And Dr. Dobson says, yes, I do. That there's a tendency to say, let's just buy a medicine for everything. And probably what you have to keep in mind is, yes, all of these drugs can help alleviate a situation, but every drug has some side effects. So think about the side effects and do your research and ask yourself if there's another way to handle it. Page 59. So what can I do to help my hyperactive child? And this might not be a child who's so hyperactive that they're ADD or ADHD, but here's what Dr. Dobson says. In fact, I'm thinking that these guidelines he gives here on page 59 would be good for just children in general. And page 60, he's got 18 of them. Be consistent. Keep your own voice quiet and slow. Try hard to keep your emotions in check. I was listening to a program the other day on television where all of the people on the panel were opposed to paddling. But they thought that to say don't ever yell at your children was just going too far. Because everyone gets to the point to where they just get so frustrated they have to yell a little bit, and children just need to learn to deal with that. Dobson would say, if he were on that panel, you wouldn't have to yell so much if every once in a while, when some of that stuff that they keep doing, that defiance, willful disobedience, that's just driving you nuts, if you just took a little paddle, like one of those little things with the little balls, the ping pong balls, or the little rubber balls on you bounce. Once it breaks, keep that around. Or get a couple of paint stirring sticks and tape them together. Or go out off the tree and cut down a little switch and just keep it handy. And when the child is doing stuff that makes you want to scream, just give them a couple of swats on their padded backside that, according to him, being a medical doctor, is so full of sensitive nerve endings that when a switch hits that little backside, it sends a message straight to the brain, whatever brought this about, don't do it again. And I just think that it's like, hey, in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I'm thinking that sometimes yelling at children is just as bad as paddling in the minds of contemporary people today. Avoid a ceaseless negative approach. Try to be more positive about things. Separate the behavior from the child's person. Have a routine for the child to follow. Designate a separate room that's their special area to go when they get frustrated. Do one thing at a time. Don't give them too many jobs to do at the same time. Give them responsibilities. Learn to read their pre-explosive warning signals. When you know some things are going on, that they're about to explode, learn how to diffuse it. Restrict playmates to one or at most two at a time. Don't pity them, tease them, or overindulge them. And always supervise the taking of medication. And where you have some success, share that with others who work with your child so they can use some of those same techniques to help your child when they're with him. Some good ideas. Page 61. What has been your greatest challenge as a father? That was a question sent to Dr. Dobson. And what did he say? Raising healthy, well-educated, self-disciplined children who love God, who love their fellow man, is what I believe to be the most challenging responsibility in living. What am I wanting to do with my children? What's the greatest challenge? Healthy. How do you raise a healthy child? Proper nutrition, proper exercise, and proper sleep. Agreed? Well educated. I was really shocked one time when I sent a weekend assignment home for some children to work on some kind of a project, and a mother called me and said, "That's why we pay tuition and send our kid to school, so you can educate them. We've got other things to do on weekends other than involve our children in learning stuff." Why wouldn't every parent think of, what can I do to help my child acquire a good education? I mean, obviously I grew up in a poor background, but my parents were college graduates. They just chose to be farmers during a time when farmers didn't make very much money, and he didn't have a father who owned a farm that he could inherit, so he just had to rent farms to do farming. But I thought, isn't this amazing? As poor as we were, we had a set of encyclopedias, and we had an old set of the Book of Knowledge, and we were always encouraged to go read that stuff and look things up. So I'm thinking that it's not a matter of you have to have a lot of money to give your child a good education. And if you live in the city, what do you have in the city that's available to every child?
Library.
A library. Take them to the public library and learn to use that to educate your children. And I'm thinking that if my child wants to play a certain video game, I'm going to play that game with them, and if it's not a healthy game, I'm going to talk to them about the dangers of it and say, where can we find something else to play that would be fun, that wouldn't be so dangerous? I'm just going to spend time educating my child. Self-discipline is the next one he talks about. How do you teach a child to be self-disciplined? By having parents who discipline them and teach them this is the right way to behave and this is the wrong way to behave. This is what's acceptable and this isn't, and live accordingly. And if you don't live accordingly, suffer the consequences. And how do you teach your children to love God? Send them to church, drive up to church and drop them off at Sunday school and leave them there so somebody will teach them about God? No. What does it say in Scripture? You talk to your children about the things. This law that I've given you is to be in your heart, and you're to do what? You're to talk about it with your children when you rise up, when you lie down, when you walk in the way. I concluded from that if I want my children to love God, they need to hear me talking about how much I love God and why I love God and why God is so worth loving. And in other words, if I want them to have a loving relationship with God, they need to hear me talking about it. I still remember the first time my wife hardly ever gets sick, and she was sick one Sunday. And I said, well, Nina, I don't think you're up to going to church, but I said, I'm going. So then I looked at our two girls and I said, so girls, are you going to church with me, or you're going to stay here and take care of Mom? And they said, what should I do? I said, I think it's up to you. I mean, it's not a matter of, if you think Mom needs some help and you think it's bad that I'm going to church, then you stay home and take care of her. And if you think she doesn't need any help and you want to go to church, you're welcome to get in the car and go with me. And I let them make some decisions. When they earn some money, I said, God talks to us about giving some of our money to Him. In the Old Testament, that principle that we've borrowed from the Old Testament. So, well, that's Old Testament. I'm thinking, why do people get so worked up about giving some of their money to God? You know what? I have a theory about this money thing. It used to be that people would earn money and then save some of it for an emergency and spend the rest and give some to church. Now, in your world that you live in, I think all the financial advisors tell you to save some money for an emergency, to invest some money for your future retirement, and to spend the rest. Well, what about giving some to the church? Well, I actually said this to a guy one time. Have you ever thought about giving money to church to help the needy? And he said, help the needy? I give every paycheck to help the needy. I said, what? He said, all that money they take out of my paycheck for the government, they're not giving it back to me. They're giving it to all the poor people in the world. And I thought, what kind of a mindset is that? And I really think that because our world has changed to where now it's like, okay, you save for an emergency, you save for retirement, and then you spend the rest to live, that somehow the church is getting shortchanged. I'm thinking there ought to be 4 buckets. If you're going to have, there used to be 3, now they've still got 3, but said no, just save some money for an emergency, put some money away for retirement, and put some money in the church. And watch. So here's a guy putting money in his retirement fund, and he's giving an offering at church. Can you see how someday when he's figuring up his taxes, he goes, wow, all that money I gave to church, if I would have put that in my retirement fund, I would have had a lot more money. You understand how that retirement fund can be a temptation to cut back on his giving. And I'm thinking we just need to teach our kids how to give. And my little girl earned some money by doing something for a neighbor lady, helping her clean her house or something. And I was explaining this to her. She goes, okay, Dad, I understand. So she takes the money she was given, and she's taking these dollar bills, and she's going, one for God and one for me. Now, what was my first reaction? Do I give 50% of my income to church? No. And my first reaction was, whoa, that's a bit too much. And I thought, wait a minute. She doesn't have any bills to pay. She doesn't have any responsibilities. If she wants to divvy it up 50-50, let her do it. There's nothing wrong with that. So I just let her divide it up the way she wanted, and then take her money to church and put it in an envelope and put it in the offering plate. Just teaching people how to have a relationship with God. And as far as your fellow man, well, if I find school supplies on sale and you have a friend at school whose parents said it cost too much, they didn't buy them, then maybe take some of the extra stuff that I have. I mean, just like yesterday was, no, we didn't have, yeah, it was yesterday. After class on my way home from school, I stopped at Walmart to buy some milk because that's the cheapest place in town to buy milk. And while I'm there, I'm looking for bargains. And on my way out, I had to get some new whiteboard markers. So I picked up the whiteboard markers, I'm headed down the aisle, and here's this sign that has Valentine teddy bears and stuffed toys, 90% off. I've never seen that at Walmart. Here's a $5 little teddy bear that I can buy for 50 cents. Here's a $5 stuffed hedgehog that I can buy for 50 cents. I'm thinking today when I leave, I'm going to stop in there and see if they have some more of those. And when I took them home, my wife goes, Tom, we don't have little kids that can use this stuff anymore. I said, no, but we have a daughter who's a teacher, and we have some friends who have little kids. Who knows who we could give it to help other people. One time, when I stopped at McDonald's and bought my daughter some food, when we left, there was a guy standing there on the street with a little sign that said, anything you can give us can help, and he had 2 little girls standing with him. And I said, hey girls, wouldn't that be fun if we just pulled up next to them and gave them the stuff we just bought from McDonald's? He has 2 little girls. You can give him what you bought. I'll give him what I bought. And then we can go back and get some more. They go, yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, just teach children how to be kind to their fellow man by them watching you and by involving them in being kind to their fellow man. Okay, enough of that one. Let's move on to page 65. Might have to move faster than that. Yeah, what is the behavioral research tell us about the best way to raise children? I just thought on page 65, I like what Dobson says. My answer might sound like heresy, coming from a man who spent 10 years of his life as a professor of pediatrics, responsible for medical and behavioral research, but I don't believe the scientific community is capable of determining the best parenting techniques. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't give us some helpful information. We can learn a lot from them. But where do you go to get your best information on parenting? What do you think happens if you Google scriptures on parenting? What do you think would happen if you Googled that? It would pop up on the screen, nothing found. Do you think somebody out there has collected all the places where God has talked about parenting and they put it on the internet? Well, as a matter of fact, what does the Bible say about parenting? One place it said 23 verses about parenting. Another one said 10 verses that have to do with being a parent. The one that said, what does the Bible say about parenting? I clicked on it. It had 99 verses from Scripture listed. So any serious Christian who wants to know something about parenting can simply go to the internet, find out those 99 references, and go study each of them and look at the context and extract some principles that are best practices on how to be a good parent. Now, it isn't that you can't supplement that with scientific research, but watch this. If scientific research says something God told me about being a good parent was wrong, then guess what? I'm going to keep what God says and discard the scientific research. This law that I give you is to be in your heart, and you're to talk about it to your children when you lie down, when you rise up, when you walk in the way. So here I am, memorizing the 10 Commandments. And it's time for my children to go to bed. And what do? As a good follower of God, I say, before you go to sleep, let's read one of these 10 Commandments and talk about it. Let's see, pick one. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. I mean, you understand? It's like, now can you see how somebody would say, you know what? If every night when you put your child to bed, you talk about one of those traumatizing commands from God, you could traumatize them all night long. You follow what some scientific behaviorist could come up with? And I'm going, guess what? If it's a little traumatizing, it's probably good trauma. I'm going to give them the Word of God. Now, I didn't give them the 10 Commandments. I just took things from the Bible and read a Bible verse to them and gave them a little Bible story and prayed with them before they went to bed. And if they were afraid of something, I would ask God to help them overcome their fears and just know that He's there. Were any of you taught this little kid's prayer? I never did this with my kids. I mean, the first time I heard this, I thought, what is this all about? Who came up with that one? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. You know, I'm thinking, whoever came up with that one now, that's going to traumatize children. What if I fall asleep and can't remember to breathe all night long? I'm dead. Come on, people. Okay, enough of that. Let's move on to page 73. I gotta skip some because we missed today here. Page 73, number 91. Do you think most of the differences? Oh no, number 90. Are there times when good, loving parents don't like their own kids? And Dr. Dobson said yes. And I put down no. I mean, my first reaction was, no, There are not times when I don't like my own kids. I love my children. There are times when I don't like what they are doing. You see the difference? Maybe that's because I've studied behaviorism so much and I've studied all this stuff to where I want to make a distinction. Maybe the scientific community has affected me. I want to make a distinction between talking about who they are as a person and how they behave, what they do. And I'm going to let them know that no matter what, I love them. They are a gift from God. They are special to me. But I might not like what they're doing. But Dr. Dobson said, yes, just as there are times in a good marriage when husbands and wives don't like each other for a while. And see, I'm thinking, has there been a time when I didn't like Nina? It's like, no, I think she's the neatest lady in the world. She's my best friend. It's like, but are there times when you don't like what she does? Yeah. But you see, that's different. Do you think it's important for us to separate our feelings for the person as opposed to our feelings about the way they're behaving? So they don't get those confused. Number 91, don't you think most of the differences between the sexes result from cultural conditioning? If we raise boys and girls the same way, these differences would disappear. And Dr. Dobson says, I couldn't disagree more. God created male and female. And did he make men and women with distinctive differences? I mean, if Logan would have walked in here today and said, Micah, I like your sweatshirt. It just enhances your facial features. It's like, what? But do girls do that all the time? I mean, and do we think anything about it? No, that's just what women do. You understand? There are gender differences. There are differences between men and women that are there, and frankly, my theory is the reason they're there is because God intended for a lifetime of marriage to be constantly entertaining, rewarding, something to laugh about. My wife and I can still talk about our differences and laugh about those, or we can get a little testy with each other and wonder, when's the other one going to become more like me? And they're not. That's just selfishness. And I think some of those differences are there, so we have opportunities to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow the Lord Jesus. It's just a matter of saying, God created us to complement each other's lives. What I think is there are some people in this world with an agenda who would like to think that boys and girls are not that different. Well, it doesn't matter how much they talk about it and how much they say it. Boys and girls are different. Page 81. Philosophically, I recognize the need to take charge of my kids, but I need more specifics. Give me a step-by-step approach to discipline that will help me do the job correctly. Now, you know why somebody wants Dobson to give them a step-by-step approach? The Bible gives a lot of general principles with some specifics. You know what I think happens? We tend to want prescriptions rather than general principles and have to figure out how to apply the general principle. Children, obey your parents. Honor your father and mother. So, how do I teach my girls to honor their mother? Okay, I know my wife's characteristics. She doesn't like to tell her daughters more than once to do things. So I say, girls, the best thing you can do to honor your mother is whenever she gives you a directive, do it the first time. No, she won't give a directive the first time. In fact, she doesn't like giving directives. She would rather make suggestions. So watch this. Lydia, what would have been your reaction if your mother would have said, Lydia, would you like to help clear the table and do the dishes?
Fine.
Because what was she really saying? I want you. And one of my daughters said one time, no, Mom, I'd rather not. I have other things I'd rather do. And I just said, get in there and clean the table and do the dishes. Well, she didn't tell me to. She was asking if I want to. I said, you understand the way I'm teaching my daughters to honor their mother is to have them do something that kind of dovetails with their mother's personality. And that's the general principle. So what I find is, in fact, I used to have parents say to me, hey, you're doing a pretty good job with your daughters. Can you give me some pointers on what I should do with my daughter? Well, I'd say, well, the only way I could do that is if your daughter came to live with us and I got to know her and I knew her personality well enough to know what kind of things to work on. You follow what I'm talking about? We need to spend time absorbing the general principles that God gives us in His Word and then asking God for wisdom as to how to apply it in life to each of our situations. But what I think has happened in our world today is we've become less rigorous in our thinking. We don't want to have to think it through. We just want someone to give us 5 steps to success. And I'm thinking, no, if God gave us all these general principles, He wants us to read the principles, to memorize the concept, to adjust our thinking, and then let this new way of thinking work itself out in our lives as we acknowledge Him in all our ways and let Him direct our path. But anyway, Dobson answers their question because he knows where people are. So he gives them 6 broad guidelines. First, define the boundaries. Second, when defiantly challenged, respond with confident decisiveness. Can you picture this? Here are the boundaries. No running in the house. I don't know why that's the boundary, but there it is. And the child runs in the house. And the mother says, you know the boundaries. Why were you running in the house? Now, why do you have to ask that? And, I mean, if a child was honest, what would he say? Because I felt like running, I don't care about your boundaries. I mean, and then it's like, how dare you be so rude? Well, they're just being honest about their depravity. Say, and Sid, I'm thinking, if that's the boundary, and say, look, the boundary is no running in the house. I know sometimes you get so excited, you want to run around through the house, but running is for outdoors. Inside we walk. Now, I'm going to remind you, but if you don't remember that boundary, there are going to be some consequences. You understand? You have to be decisive and you have to be confident in how you handle it. And quit going out, why are they doing this? Why aren't they just doing everything I say? Because you didn't do that when you were a kid. Page 82, number 3, distinguish between willful defiance and childish irresponsibility. I mean, if the child has their friend over and they're playing and all of a sudden they get tickled and they start running, they're not being defiant, they're just playing and having fun. And then stop and think as the adult in the room, you know, it could be at their house, they don't have a rule about not running in the house. Did any of you grow up in a home where there was a rule about you have an inside voice and an outside voice, and you don't use your outside voice inside? None of you grew up with that either. You were allowed to be as loud as you want to be in the house, and you could run as much as you wanted. See, I don't know what you were raised with, But at my house, if you want to run around, go outside. And keep it down. You're in the house. We can hear you. No loud noises. You say, why? It bothered my mom. That was her personality. So you say, just watch out for that stuff. So make a difference. If he's just being defiant, then we better deal with that. My mom did. She sat me in the corner and said, sit there for 30 minutes. Do you have any idea for a hyperactive child how hard it is to sit in a corner with your feet up against the wall and all you can see is wallpaper? And I'm sitting there looking at the wallpaper, studying all the little minute patterns in there. And all of a sudden I noticed something. There was a seam right there in the wallpaper, and there was a place where some of the wallpaper had popped away from the rest of it, where the glue didn't stick completely. And I put my fingernail in there to see how big that space was. And you know what happened when I put my fingernail in it? It got bigger. And I'm going, whoa! Little hyperactive Tommy has just run his fingernail up and down the wall, and a place that was just about the size of your little finger has now become about a 12-inch piece of wallpaper that's being peeled off the wall. The next thing I know, okay, this wasn't appropriate, and I didn't, as an adult, I would never do it, but the next thing I know is I felt a stinging sensation on the back of my head. Because my mother walked up and saw what I was doing to the wallpaper, and she just smacked me in the back of the head. Maybe that traumatized me enough where that's why I don't smack kids in the back of the head. And it's like, what were you doing? Now, see, as an adult, if I was talking to a young mother, I would say, what are you doing putting a hyperactive child in a corner where he's going to go bonkers if he doesn't have something to do? Well, what should I make him do for 30 minutes? If he's hyperactive, how about making him go outside and run around the house going, ah, for 30 minutes? And using his loud voice outside so he won't use it inside all the time. You understand? Look at some creative alternatives that fit the situation. Number 4, reassure and teach as soon as the confrontation is over. After it's over, after the child gets to run around the house for 30 minutes, yelling at the top of his voice, he comes back and he said, there, now I think you're ready to come indoors and comply with the rules. And I love you very much. And if there's something I can do to help you remember the rules, let me know. Do I need to write them on paper and put them on the wall? In other words, after we have the problem, let's talk about what we can do to keep it from happening in the future. Let's let people know we care for each other and we love each other. Number 5, avoid impossible demands. Be absolutely sure that your child is capable of delivering what you require. Just don't ask them to do more than they're capable of doing. And number 6, let love be your guide. A relationship that's characterized by genuine love and affection is likely to be a healthy one, even though some parental mistakes and errors are inevitable. Nobody's going to be a perfect parent. Did you have perfect parents? Any of you in this room have perfect parents? Okay, if your parents were perfect, knowing yourself, would you be inclined not to be a parent, knowing your own imperfections? And the fact that you grew up to be a successful adult with imperfect parents says that your imperfections aren't going to ruin your children either. Okay. Page 90. What's the most common error made by parents in disciplining their children? And isn't this interesting in light of the panel that I told you I heard on television recently where they were discussing parenting? Dr. Dobson says, I would have to say it's the inappropriate use of anger in attempting to manage boys and girls. It's one of the most ineffective methods of attempting to influence human beings of all ages. Why would that be? If I'm wanting a child to control their behavior and I'm losing control by yelling at them? What am I modeling? That an adult can't control himself in this situation. Maybe I should have copied that page and emailed it to the people who were serving on that panel. You know what happens when I read things on the internet and then I see a flaw in their thinking and I send them an email to point out their flaw, and I do it in a nice way. I say, maybe you should take another look at this issue and think about it from this perspective. Do any of those people send me an email and said, oh, thank you, Tom. I so appreciate you pointing out to me that I missed something. Do I ever get emails like that from these people who are writing these articles? So my wife says, so if you never get a response, Tom, why do you keep writing the articles? Why do you keep responding to this stuff and adding these little things? Because I just think somebody needs to speak up and sound the alarm. We at least need to say it so somebody out there is thinking about it. Maybe they'll be a little more careful next time. Maybe they won't because they have an agenda and they're not inclined to be careful. Page 92. I find I'm more likely to say no to my children than to say yes. Dad, can we go outside and play in the snow? No. Now, why did I say no so quick? Do I want to get dressed up, bundled up, and go outside and play in the snow where it's cold? Or do I want to sit here in my easy chair and work a sumoku? If the kids want to go outside and play, oh, by the way, if I say no, just play in the house today. Let's see, what does that mean? Run and scream and yell, use your outside running around voice in the house. Now they're in trouble? No, Tom, what you should have said was, sure, let me get my clothes on and let's go outside and play. But I don't feel like it. Well, who cares how you feel? It's parent time, folks. It's time to be a parent. And if being a good parent means that I quit saying no all the time just because it's inconvenient and say, sure, we can do that. I mean, what if a grandchild came and said, Poppy, I have a report due tomorrow and I need some poster board. Can you take me up to Walmart to buy some? I know it's late. No, I don't think so. Why don't you ask your mom or your dad to take you? What kind of grandparent would I be? Want to know something? I know grandparents who would say, I'll tell you the kind of grandparents you want to be is say no. You raise your kids, let your kids raise their kids. You ever hear that? I mean, I hear more selfish comments made by people my age. I'm thinking these people are missing out on something. I mean, my grandchild just asked for something and I can either, what does my wife call this stuff? We can either make memories for our grandchildren, positive things that they can think about once we are gone, or I can just say no to everything. It's like, yeah, let's get in the car and run up there. Let's do that. I mean, no, you can't go outside and play. Yeah, let's go outside and play. No, you can't have a cookie. Okay, and the other day I did that. I said, you know what? It's almost dinner time, and your mother doesn't want you to spoil your appetite. So let's pick out a cookie and put it on the table next to your plate, and you can have that for dessert afterwards. You understand? There are ways to avoid saying no without just indulging the child. No, you can't use the telephone. Well, if I say yes to you using the telephone, will you be on there for 45 minutes talking to your friends when I'm expecting a call from somebody? Or could you talk to them in 5 minutes and tell them I can't talk long because my dad's expecting someone to call him tonight? So I'll just talk for 5 minutes. You understand? Negotiate with them. Talk about what's doable. No, you can't spend the night with a friend. Well, you know what? I'll be truthful with you. When my girls were little, There's a lot of weirdos out there, right? And I don't know who's a weirdo and who isn't. And all their friends at school say, can you spend the night with me? And I'm going to say no. No, I'm not. I'm going to say, I don't know that family very well, but you could invite them to spend the night with you. You follow? They still get to spend the night together. They just do it at our house instead of theirs. Well, that's really going to create a lot of work. Well, so be it. I want to be protective of my 2 daughters. You say, well, won't the other family say, well, we don't know them very well? You know what I think happened? Because I was a teacher at the school and my wife was a teacher at the school, other parents didn't have any problem with their kids coming to our house. So we just said, come to our house. So you understand how I could take almost anything that it would be easy in the flesh to say no to and say, let's think about that. Let's talk about that. When we first moved here from Peoria, all of my daughter's friends, they did this on Saturday. They went to the mall and just hang out on Saturday. I don't know if a pre-adolescent is safe hanging out in a mall. You know what I'm talking about? And this was even a number of years ago. And I said, girls, instead of hanging out at the mall on Saturdays, let's take some of that money that you earned from having a garage sale when we were in Peoria, and let's go buy season passes to Worlds of Fun. And then we'll go to Worlds of Fun every Saturday with our season pass, and you can invite your friends who hang out at the mall to go with you if they want to. Which would you rather do as a pre-adolescent? Hang out at the mall or go to Worlds of Fun? And you know what I discovered? I discovered that instead of saying no to stuff that wasn't very healthy, saying let's do this instead, all the healthier stuff, all the better stuff costs more money and takes more time. So then I asked this question of a parent. So how committed are you to investing in your child's growth and development and helping them to become all that God wants them to be? Okay, let's move on to page 96. No. Whoa. 106. 106. Boy, I'm skipping a lot of stuff in here. Rewards. 100. Yeah, I don't want to skip rewards. I like those. Page 100. I'm uncomfortable using rewards to influence my kids. It seems too much like bribery to me. So is that what the boss does at work? He bribes you by paying you for coming into work? I mean, that's my question I'd ask. I'd like to hear your views on it. And Dr. Dobson says, many parents feel as you do. And in response, I say, don't use them if you're philosophically opposed to the concept. It is unfortunate, however, that one of our most effective teaching tools is often rejected because of what I would consider to be a misunderstanding of terms. Now, I like what he said there. One of our most effective teaching tools is often rejected because of our predisposed concepts or our misunderstanding of terms. Now, let's ask a question here. When we discuss these things about, say, well, my parents said we don't reward our kids for anything. They just do what they do because it's expected of them. And here's the asked question. And so here's what I did when I encountered parents who felt this way, and I used rewards at school. I just mentioned it today in math class. We're doing some stuff in logic that really is brain stretching. And you could see the looks on people's faces where this is not any fun. I said, you know what would make this more fun is if during this chapter on logic, if you brought a little bag of M&Ms, and every time you start getting an awful taste in your mouth about logic, just pop in an M&M, and the sweet chocolatey flavor will make the logic taste better. Didn't Mary Poppins talk about that? a little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down? It's like you're rewarding yourself for working hard at trying to understand it. And so I actually put on a piece of paper, does God ever use rewards for his children or his chosen people? And what's the answer to that question?
Yes.
Yes. So therefore, not only is it a very effective tool based on modern day research, if it's something God did, then I shouldn't be afraid to use it. Just don't, as he says on page 101, rewards should never be used as a payoff for a child not disobeying. If you don't disobey, I'll reward you. No. If my wife had things she wanted the girls to do and she didn't want to remind them all the time, I said, Nina, just make a list of the things you want the girls to do on a daily basis. And then I'll make a chart for each of them. And those 6 things will be on the chart, or 7 or 8 or 10, whatever you give them. And then by each one of them, each day of the week, I'll have them put a check mark when they do it. And then at the end of the week, I'll count up the check marks, and that's how much money they'll get. And when they were really little, I could give them a penny for each check mark. Then as they got older, I bumped it up to a nickel for each check mark. And when they got a little older, I bumped it up to a dime for each check mark. And somebody said, so when are you going to have to bump it up to a quarter? This actually happened. As they got older and started earning money from babysitting other people's kids, why would people at church ask our daughters to be babysitters? Because they were so responsible. You understand? They were so mature. So what happened is parents would ask them to be babysitters, and they started earning money. And I still remember the first time one of them said, Dad, I don't think you need to pay me for doing my chores around here anymore. I just should do it. I said, good for you. Because now they have another source of money. But I was rewarding them for being obedient. And it worked out quite well. Sometimes to my own hurt. When the oldest daughter turned 16, and I told her that whatever she had in the bank, I would match it to help her go buy a car. The youngest daughter said, are you going to do that for me when I'm 16, Dad? And I said, yes. Any idea what she started doing 4 years before she was 16?
Saving up a bunch of money.
Squirreling away her money, Logan. She didn't spend any money on anything because she was saving it all for when she got a car. And when she turned 16, she had a good chunk of change in the bank. And she bought her a pretty nice car for the first car. And I thought, you know what? I'm just rewarding her for being responsible. Page 106. Would you go so far as to apologize to a child if you felt you'd been wrong? If I was in the wrong, would I apologize to a child? To my own child? Or to a child in my classroom in Sunday school or in Awanas or someplace like that? And what's the answer?
Yeah.
Yes. If I want them to learn to apologize, then they need to see me doing it once in a while. So we say yes. And Doc's answer is, I certainly would. Well, why would anyone question that? Well, if you apologize to the child, it might undermine your authority. No, in fact, it'll enhance your authority because it enhances your relationship to them and makes them respect you more. Okay, page 1. Where'd it go here? Got little marks on here to keep me moving. Page 113. Top of the page, do you think you should spank a child for every act of defiance or disobedience? And Dobson says no. Corporal punishment should be a rather infrequent occurrence. If someone says to you, I don't know what to do with this child. Every time he misbehaves, I paddle him and he still misbehaves. I'm thinking, then you don't understand your child very well. Apparently, they're a tough little cookie where pain doesn't bother them. Find another way to deal with this. And did any of your parents figure out ways to deal with you in terms of discipline that wasn't corporal punishment, but was rather painful? Did they ever take away some privileges? Or some toys? Or restrict some places where you could go or things you could do? I mean, if my children were misbehaving in a restaurant after we leave church on Sunday, what's the routine? Let's vote. Who wants to go home and eat sandwiches and watch sports on TV? And who wants to go to a restaurant for dinner? And it was always 3 against 1. I would vote to go home, and my wife and 2 daughters would vote to go out to eat. So we'd go out to eat. If while we're out eating, the girls threw a fit and misbehave, I would probably say next Sunday, well, we're not voting about going out to eat today because last Sunday somebody didn't have their best behavior on in the restaurant, so none of us are going to get to go to the restaurant this week. And would that be more significant to a little kid who wants to go out to eat than being paddled for being disobedient in the restaurant? You understand? You find the things that are valuable and you take them away. If my 2 daughters are fighting over some toys, I go, which toy are you girls fighting over? They show me the toy they're fighting over. I say, give me the toy. Now you won't fight over it anymore. Now, this probably isn't a good idea. My wife never cared for it. But I'll just confess that I did this. One time, there was one toy that they both seemed to fight over all the time. And I said, that's it. I'm tired of you girls fighting over this one toy, so give it to me. And I put it in a trash can and just smashed it right there in front of them. And Nina said, they go, Mom, he broke our toy, he shattered it, he threw it in the trash, it's no good. And I still remember she said, girls, your dad does not like fussing. Figure it out. If you keep fussing over stuff, you'll lose it. And then later she said to me, she goes, did you have to break it? Couldn't you just put it away for a while? I'm going, yeah, I probably could have, but I wanted to make a lasting impression. She said, well, you made one. So I'm not saying everything I did is something you ought to do. I'm just telling you that if that was a mistake, well, it got the point across, and I don't recall them fussing it much about their toys after that. So, hey, it worked for me. But if you say, well, I could never do that, well, then don't do it. Try something else. But don't be paddling them for every little thing. And then Dobson says also on page 113, after I spank my child, she usually wants to hug me and make up. And I don't feel good about that because I need to show her my displeasure. Dr. Dobson says, no, it's very important after punishment to embrace the child in love. In fact, when I read that, I thought, after I punish my child, I need to give him a big hug. And what I discovered was that while I was trying to give him a big hug, they would sometimes say, I don't want a hug, Dad. I don't feel like hugs right now. I'm going, I don't care how you feel. I just did something that was unpleasant, and now I want to do something to show you how much I love you and care for you. And I'd grab them and squeeze them and hug them. And so, but see, it's like this parent saying, no, I need to reinforce my negative message. No, you've got your negative message over. You reinforce the fact that you love these kids no matter what. 113? Where are we going now? 120, 118. 118. How are we doing? Up to chapter 9. What do you think of placing children in child care centers so mothers can work? If a mother has to work because she's a single mother, she doesn't have much choice about it, does she? if she has to put her child someplace to be cared for while she's working, where would be the first place you would recommend she take the child?
The church.
What?
The church?
To a church child care center?
Yeah.
Any place else?
Or a relative.
Or a relative? A grandmother? Or an aunt? Or an uncle? In Oklahoma we say aunt, but I guess that's the little critters that run around the ground. An aunt or an uncle? It is A-U-N-T, isn't it?
We say aunt too.
I say
You
Yeah,
say
I say
aunt too?
Yeah.
Oh.
We say aunt. I say aunt.
An aunt or an uncle with some relative. In fact, when my wife was a teacher, when we had children and we both decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, that meant we went from 2 teacher salaries to 1 teacher salary in a Christian school. Let me tell you something, that's not easy. You have to, now you know why I bargain shop at thrift stores. It became a habit but what happened is, when she became a stay-at-home mom, because she had been a teacher, we had some neighbors who lived on our block who said, hey, instead of putting my child in child care, how about when I go to work, I drop the child off at your house and they stay with you until I come home from work, and I'll pay you the same money I paid child care. And all of a sudden, my wife has a job, staying at home with her children, being paid to supervise the neighbors' children so she gets to influence their lives. Now, I think those neighbors made a good choice, but she had a little money to spend to buy some things that she wouldn't have had otherwise. And she didn't have to have a car to go to work. And I thought, what a beautiful arrangement. But when our daughters both had little boys born 5 days apart, I told my wife, it's time for you to quit working. Because after they were grown and school age, she went back to school working again. I said, so you can be a full-time grandmother. She goes, but I like my job, Tom. I said, I know you do, but guess what? Those girls, if their boys are hyperactive like I am, they're going to have their hands full. And so if you're working, they'll let some older lady at church watch the boys while they go shopping. Would you rather keep working and have some lady at church become a fill-in grandmother for your boys? Or would you rather stop working and be a full-time fill-in grandmother whenever you're needed? And she didn't even hesitate. She said, okay, Tom, I'll quit. But, and here's what she added, but don't ever ask me to go back to work again if money gets tight. And I said, I won't, because, and here's why I said I won't. Because if money gets tight at my house, I can go back to Longview Community College and sign up to teach a couple of math classes. And I can make as much teaching math over there part-time as she made working full-time in a Christian school. And I used to do that. But now I have too many evening activities with grandchildren to where it's just, I'd rather shop at thrift stores so I can be involved in my grandchildren's lives in the evening hours. Okay, enough of that. So, yeah, if you have to put them in child care, put them in a good place. Page 119, you've talked about being a full-time mother versus having a career. Can a woman do both? And Dobson's answer is, some women can do both, but not every woman's capable of doing that. It's just too much for her. And then on page 121, he says, what answer do you have for those who say being a mother of small children and a homemaker is boring and monotonous? My first response would be, you've never been a mother of small children at home. There's nothing boring and monotonous about being a stay-at-home mom and raising children. It's one of the most exciting things you can do. And for my wife, who was a teacher, she loved having these 2 little chippers at home to where she could teach them all the time. And Dr. Dobson says that we should recognize that most other occupations are boring at times too, but that being a mother and raising children and being a homemaker is one of the most noble things you can ever do in life. All right, we made it up to chapter 10. So let's see what that does for us, and we'll pick up with this stuff again on Monday. Is this Friday? We missed a day. I'm all messed up. Have a nice weekend. For those online, there's no tape for Wednesday because we didn't have class.